State Hazard Mitigation Officer, and I'm going to demonstrate how to do a benefit cost analysis for a wildfire mitigation proposal, specifically one that includes defensible space and ignition resistant materials activities. This is intended for HMGP Post Fire applicants, but it might be applicable to a lot of people doing this work. Again, this is just how I would do it. There are multiple ways of approaching a BCA for this kind of work. I'm going to use the Wildfire module in FEMA's BCA tool. So let's get started. So this is the home screen of FEMA's BCA tool. I have version 5.2.1. I noticed they have released 5.3, but for my demonstration, I'm just going to use the tool that I have, and that would be okay in this case. They're not that much different, if at all. So you notice here on the quick start area, this is the home screen, like I said, this button right here. Two first things to do: you create a new project and you create a new structure. So on create a new project, my project is going to be the name of that, I assume, will be the same as the application or the proposal that I'm submitting for grant consideration. I actually developed a sample application, a full application for a hazard county, a fictitious county, hazard county mitigation project, and that's going to be the basis of my BCA today. I'm going to use the information in there to inform the data I plug into my demonstration. So if you happen to have that application, I send it out to a number of you. Feel free to follow along or reference that. But I have a cheat sheet of all the various facts and figures that were in that application. So I'm gonna go ahead and start. I've already created a project. There it is, Hazard County Mitigation Project. If you click on the Projects tab, you'll see it there. Okay, and if I click into this, it already has one of my subdivisions. In my sample project, I am doing defensible space and ignition resistant retrofits, roof replacements, essentially, to homes in two different subdivisions. One is the Dry Pines subdivision and the other is the Mountain View subdivision. You can see I already did a BCA for the Dry Pines subdivision, and it's attached to my project. What I'm going to show you is how to do the next one. So I'm going to do the Mountain View subdivision. You could have as many of these as you want in a single project. This tool, essentially, it's developed these could be structures, right, like individual homes. But since I have dozens of homes in each subdivision, I'm going to do one collective BCA for the entire subdivision. As you can see, the Dry Pine subdivision, when I did the work, it came up to, the BCR stands for benefit cost ratio. It comes up to a 1.04 benefit cost ratio. So that's passing. Anything over 1 is an acceptable cost effectiveness. I don't need to go any higher than that. The number is what it is. So right now, my overall project is only including this single ratio. You see right there, project BCR 104. When I add the new one, it will combine the two, and then average them for a revised project BCR. So let's get started. How do I add my Mountain View subdivision to this project? Go to Structures, button right next to Projects, click on that. You can see my Dry Pine subdivision one. I'm going to create a new one. It says Structures, but we're doing an entire subdivision. It could be a community, like a rural, a contiguous community, all connected, or it could be a neighborhood. So let's go click on New. Instead of structure name, of course, it's subdivision for me, so okay, structure type. It's not a building, it's not a utility, it's other. Not historic, there's no historic. So the address for this, since I have multiple addresses within the subdivision, I'm going to pick one. Maybe there's an HOA, a homeowner association office, or a community center or something in that subdivision. Sure, you can put that in there. Just as long as your address is in the subdivision that you're going to be conducting the work. My application says it's in the outskirts of this fictitious city of Timber, Washington. Now the county I have is Hazard County, but of course this is an actual drop down of the state of Washington. You won't find Hazard County, so I'm going to pick one. I'll pick Chelan because I happen to remember the zip code for the Chelan County side of Wenatchee area, 98801. This zip code's important, and you'll see why later. Make sure that's correct. If you want to put in a latitude or longitude for that matches this address, feel free. Structure saved successfully. Okay, so now I have the subdivision in my structures inventory. Now I need to add that structure to my project. So let's now focus on the tree on the right-hand side. You don't have to worry about the buttons too much until the end, from here on out. So double click on your project. Again, there's that one subdivision I already have. I need to add a new one. Go down to this button, add remove structures. Before I do that, let me maximize this screen. That should help. Now, add and remove structures. Okay, here's what's in my inventory, and here's what's on my project. So I'm going to select this, move it to the project, and hit OK. Successful. Okay. Okay, we got that. Now I want to do work. I want to do my mitigation information in this subdivision. So I'm going to double click this line, and that moves me into the actual subdivision. So now any information I'm putting in the following screens is specific to the Mountain View subdivision, not to the project-wide information. A couple of key buttons I'll point out here: save and go back, and save and continue. And then the structure BCR reference right here, that's going to give you a rolling total of your benefit cost ratio. It'll show zeros until you actually add in most, if not all, of the information. But it's handy when you want to, once you have that and you want to go back and make some modifications, you can keep an eye on that and see if you're helping yourself or hurting yourself. Again, the goal is to get a 1.00 or above benefit cost ratio. So let's get started. First step, again, I'm in the Mountain View subdivision section. First step, I come down, I start a new mitigation action. We're going to mitigate wildfire. Okay, clicked on that, save and continue. All right, it imported this from my structure information, 98801, state of Washington. I'm doing Chelan County, even though my fictitious proposal is for Hazard County. The reason that zip code was important is because of this average burn recurrence interval. The default setting in FEMA's BCA tool references the land fire maps. And for that zip code, the land fire map says your burn recurrence interval is every 48 years. Again, that's the default. If you want to override that default and put your own number in there that's maybe more beneficial, like say 20 years, you're going to have to, you click other, type it in, but then you're going to have to, down here, add a document, some type of source document that justifies and backs up the number you put there. That's a little extra work. In my case, I'm going to try it with the default first and see if I get the score I want. That'll save me time. I'm only going to do this extra work to justify if I can't get the score I need by using FEMA's default information. So let's stick with the default and then come down to here. What mitigation measures are you proposing for this project? So you're going to select all that apply. In my case, I'm doing defensible space activities in this neighborhood, and I'm also doing some ignition-resistant construction activities. I'm doing roof replacements for, I believe it's at least 10 of the houses we're targeting for roof replacements, or at least we're going to be offering it. Offering a good portion of our budget is going toward cost sharing for homeowners that want to do that. So we want to capture that in this part here. And notice every box I check increases my cost effectiveness percentage in that grayed out box by 10%. So if I'm just doing defensible space activities, notice that 10% cost effective, or not cost effective, but project effectiveness, meaning what percentage would you expect this activity to reduce damage of the fire that is has a burn recurrence interval of 48 years. It's kind of wonky and in the weeds. I'm not going to get too in detail. I just want to point out that that percentage changes based on how many boxes you click. So I'm doing these two, 20%. What if I was going to do all three? 30%. The higher the percentage of effectiveness, the better your score is probably going to be. Okay, so I'm doing just defensible space and the ignition resistant work. So we got 20%, save and continue. Okay, project useful life in years. This is asking how long, in our case, how long, let's go with the defensible space. How long will the defensible space conditions last? I mean, a roof retrofit, we're only doing a handful of those, and we know those could be, what, 30 to 50 years or more. But that would not be a credible project useful life for our defensible space activities. So we're going to stick with defensible space. And in that case, for my project, it's 10 years. Where do I come up with that number? Well, my maintenance plan and the homeowner agreements that I'm going to use, both of them are going to ask for or even require that the participants maintain defensible space conditions on their property for at least 10 years. So that's my justification for that number. And when I click out of that box, see that exclamation mark that shows up next to it, next to the number? Let me hover over that. Justification or supporting documentation required for project useful life. So it's asking me to come down here, justification, documentation, and provide additional information to back up that 10 years. In this case, the way you want to do this is always make sure that your cursor is in the field that you want to add a justification to. So my cursor's in the field, I've clicked on that. I'm going to come down here. I have two options under justification. I can just type in information, enter sentences or information by typing in, or on this tab I can upload documents, backup source documents to validate something. For this one, I'm going to just type in a justification explaining the homeowner agreements and the maintenance plan requirement. Okay. And now when you're done with that, I'll read that out loud. Our homeowner agreements and maintenance plans will require participants to maintain defensible space conditions for at least 10 years. Save that justification, that bottom right-hand box there. Click on that. Okay. And then these toggles here are asking, do you have a detailed scope of work? Yes, I do. It's in my application. Do you have a detailed estimate for the entire project? Yeah, I do. Okay, and so since I said yes to that, it says, okay, what is your project cost? For that, I'm going to reference my budget summary sheet. This is an attachment that hopefully you're going to use and attach to your full application document when you submit it. If you'll notice on the columns, these are the budget categories that show up on the full application package, at least the ones that I'm going to be spending money in. Along the rows, I have my neighborhoods, Dry Pines and Mountain View. And that allows me to kind of do the crosswalk and total it both ways. So I can get a project cost total by neighborhood, right on this side, and I can get a project cost totals by category, by budget category. Okay, so in this case, Mountain View, neighborhood, the total cost I'm estimating is $104,580. So let's enter that in the BCA tool. Okay, and guess what? It's going to ask me to justify that. So what am I going to use in this case? Well, going back to my budget sheet, cost estimate assumptions, I have included a bunch of information that explains how I arrived at these numbers. So this is a great document to use as a justification to attach to a BCA to back up my number. So that's what I'm going to do. How do you attach a document? Well, let me show you. It's down in the justifications form. Again, make sure your cursor is in the box that you're wanting to back up. Come down here, click Upload Documents. Add a new document. Go to my folder, BCA work, budget summary sheet. There we go. There it is. It appeared right there. I can view it. I can remove it. Let's go ahead and view it just to make sure. It's opening up. It opens up in Excel, not as a PDF. So if you don't want anybody messing with this, maybe you want to PDF it first and then attach it. Either way works for me. Okay, so we've justified that box. Let's go back to the next box, annual project maintenance cost. Now for that, it's asking what's, I think it's kind of self-evident, but I'll explain it anyway. What will it cost to maintain defensible space conditions on these project sites for the 10-year duration of the project useful life? Annually, what's it going to cost annually? I'm going to be really conservative, even though I think this number's really high. I'm going to put $1,000. It may be lower and higher depending on your scenario. Feel free to ask folks, or maybe you have good information. It could be costs incurred by homeowners to do their own maintenance, right? It doesn't necessarily have to be your jurisdiction going out there spending staff time and dollars. It just wants to know in general, what does it cost to maintain these safer conditions? Okay, so when I entered that in, what it did, I'm just getting this exclamation mark here, so let me make sure. Oh, there we go. It went away. That little paperclip means something is attached, and I have a justification for it. So I wanted to see that paperclip. Anyway, when I entered that number in, annual project cost, see down here, it says number of years of maintenance, 10 years, same as the project useful life. And the box below, present worth of annual maintenance costs is $7,024. Well, why wouldn't it be, $10,000? Well, because of inflation. Does the estimate reflect current prices? Yes. So today's $1,000 is, maybe $800 or $700 9 or 10 years from now. So this is actually factoring in what they call a discount rate to account for that increasing for the deflation of the value of today's dollars over time. If that makes any sense. Don't worry about it if it doesn't make sense. I'm just pointing it out. Just make sure you type something in that number, or else the BCA tool won't let you advance. And any grayed out boxes you don't have to worry about. Okay, so that gives me a final mitigation project cost of $111,604. That's totaling in what I say it's going to cost me to set up the defensible space condition and what it's going to cost over 10 years to maintain that condition. $111,604. This is the number, this is the cost side of the ratio. This is what's going to be compared against the benefits that I'm going to enter into the tool next. Okay, volunteer costs. This is another cost field. You don't have to fill this out because for your project costs, or for my sample project costs, that $104,580 included the value of any labor that might be donated to the project, like homeowners. Homeowners might be doing work. Well, since you can use that as local match to contribute to the project, it's already factored in to my project cost, and that'll be the same with you. So when you get to this screen, leave it blank. You don't need to put anything in there. Okay, now we're on to the benefits. We want to capture the value of what we're protecting, and this screen does the vast majority of it. First question, how many buildings will this proposed project protect? In my case, there are 18 homes in the Mountain View neighborhood. Now, in practice, you could actually, this tool allows you to go out. If I was doing a hazardous fuels reduction project, not a defensible space one, if I was just protecting a neighborhood by other means, I could draw a radius around my work 2 miles in diameter and capture the value of anything in that 2-mile radius. If there were 100 homes in that 2-mile radius, I could put 100 homes right here. But I don't need to do that in this case because I think I want to kind of do the minimum amount of work needed to get my 1.0 or above. And I think I could get it with just the 18 homes in the Mountain View neighborhood that we're treating, right? Start with the most conservative BCA. And then if you need to add a bunch of value to achieve the 1.0 or above, then fine, you can go back and do a little bit more work. But let's see if we can pass the requirement with just putting the 18 in. Okay, so the next question is the total building replacement value. How much is all that worth? How much are these buildings worth if you had to build them again? So where do you get that number? I get it from the tax assessor's websites. Excuse me. I look at, if I go into a tax assessor's website at a parcel, the tax assessor's value is divided between the value of the land and the acreage of the land and the improvements on the land or the buildings and structures. So if you just take that buildings and structures part, that's a totally valid source for arriving at your number here, at your BRV, your building replacement value. But let me show you what I did. In my budget summary sheet, I kind of did an average building values work. So I looked at the 18 homes and the tax assessor value of the 18 homes and came up with an average home value for the neighborhood. And then again, the structures. And then I used that value and just multiplied it by 18. And that's how I got my building replacement value for the entire subdivision. Again, this is the combined total of all of them in the subdivision. So in this case, mine is $4.6 million, not bad. So let's go back to the screen and type that in. 540,000. Okay, and I'll address those exclamation marks in a second, but first I want to point out what the tool did. Notice I've got this default toggle here for the value of project area building contents. So it's gonna multiply by 50% whatever I put in the BRV field. It just cuts it in half. It assumes that for your contents, and that's usually enough to get you the score you need. But if you were protecting a fire station, for example, that had really valuable apparatus and equipment in the building, in other words, the contents of the building might be worth a heck of a lot more than the building itself, then you would click Other and type in the value you have. And that would just simply require you, though, to back up your claim with documents or justification down below. Again, using the FEMA default value, you don't have to justify the number. You can move on. So I'm going to try that. And also for residential properties, that's a standard. I would stick with the default. Okay, now let's address these exclamation marks here. So how do I justify the 18 buildings, that there are 18 buildings in Mountain View neighborhood or subdivision? Well, part of it a good source would be a project area map or some type of aerial image that shows all of the homes and structures in the neighborhood, right, in your project area. And you're going to be attaching that document. It's a required attachment to your full application document. So I'm just going to mention that here. I'm going to say that. Subdivision, not neighborhood. A project area map Now, I'm just saying a project area map is attached to the HMGP application, partly because I just don't really like it when I get application packages that have the same exact document attached a bunch of times, even if it's just attached to a BCA. If this was going up to a national technical review, like FEMA headquarters or something, I would say you definitely want to attach this map or this source document to the BCA in addition to the application. In this case, I I guess suppose you still could do that. Feel free, but I'm not gonna do that. This justification comment would be enough, and it would allow me as a reviewer to reference that application or reference that attachment. I mean, so I'm going to save that justification, and I have a little question here. It showed up on my other screen. Spelling error found. HMGP. Okay, allow me to save that. Next field. Now the next actually 4 fields, I am going to wait. I'm going to wait to put any data in there until I get to the next few screens to find out if I've already achieved the 1.0 ratio or not. If I haven't reached the 1.0 ratio with just this information in, I can always go back and enter more benefits, more things that we're going to be protecting in these fields. Let's look at these fields. The value of infrastructure, vulnerable to fire within the proposed project area. So if there's a road or a water tower or power lines, you know, if you have, the thing is, everything you put in here, you have to provide backup documentation or justification for the cost, for the value of it. So that requires a little extra work. Value of timber to be sold within the proposed project area. Not that you're going to be selling timber as part of the project, but it just wants to know what's the value of the marketable timber that you're protecting. And then lastly, fire suppression costs for one typical fire event within the proposed project area. You know, if you're a fire chief and you're filling this out, or someone that works at a fire district, and you happen to have this information really handy, that might not be such a hard thing to plug in. But most of us, whether you're in a conservation district or just a public works shop or something, that's not an obvious number to come up with. So I tend to, you know, again, try getting my BCA with the easiest, most readily accessible information, and then if I still need to gather more value in this component, come back and do the work at that point, because that's going to take me additional time that I really don't want to spend on doing BCAs. And then there's the other. That can be any number of things. Again, you have to provide documentation. Cars, vehicles, no. Anything that's mobile, no. You can't put that in there. But if it's a fixed asset that's highly valuable, that's going to help your benefit side of the ratio, great. Feel free to put it in. Let's go below this line here. Number of residents within proposed project area. In my case, it's 45. Now, if you're having a hard time coming up with this number for a particular neighborhood, one way you could do it is go to the census data site, go to the government census website, and go to the basic data for your county or the nearest designated place that has population information. And the demographics information usually says, you know, how many people per single family unit or how many people per parcel live there. And it's something like 2.2 or 1.9 or whatever that is. Fine, take that number, multiply it by the number of homes in your community, and put whatever you come up with, put it there. And if it's a weird number, or if you feel like it, you can always come down here, not just when there's an exclamation mark, but at any time. If you want to make a comment about a number in one of these boxes, you can go down into the justification. Oh no, it's not going to let me, is it? Well, that's okay, fine. It doesn't want my information, I won't give it. But I was going to say, you can always justify your methodology as long as it's based on some reliable source document like the Census Bureau. Okay, next one down, current federal lodging per diem. Why is it asking for that? Well, because it's wondering about what if you had to displace, what if all these 45 people got displaced and they had to stay somewhere else, and federal meals per diem, they had to, you know, they're trying to come up with what's the cost of being displaced. And in theory, it's a benefit, you're putting it on a benefit here because your work is going to avoid some percentage of this happening. That's where that project effectiveness percentage comes in from the very beginning, 10% or 20% effective. I happen to know that the federal lodging rate for Chelan County is $93 per night, and the cost per person to eat meals per diem meals for Chelan County is $51. So plug those in. No other data to plug in here, but this does show me my total annual losses before mitigation, $150,872. Don't worry about what that means. I mean, it'll all make sense in the next few screens. There is omitted or invalid data. So this is what happens when I don't put a justification in where I'm supposed to. Now I could continue on, yes, save and continue and go back to it. You know, that sometimes is a great option when you just want to get your raw data in. You're doing kind of a triage BCA and you just want to see if you're in the ballpark or not. Or no, don't save and continue, or cancel, do not continue. So I'm going to cancel this and find out why the total building value replacement, it didn't save. Oh, I didn't address that one, did I? So in that one, I'm going to want to upload a document. And the document I'm going to use is like anything that shows the tax assessor values, or it shows my math on how I use the tax assessor values. It doesn't have to be anything fancy, but it has to be some type of document that, see, I'm just literally using a blank Word document for this example. But in real life, if I was really doing it, it could be a Word document or a PDF, or it could be a screenshot of a website, tax assessor's website, something that shows how you arrived at that BRV number. So let's just attach that. Upload document, add new document, tax assessor data is what I called it. Okay, now let's see if that exclamation mark goes away. View the file, there's the file. Okay, exclamation mark's gone. Good. Sometimes it just takes a second for it to register that I did what it said I had to do. All right, next screen, save and continue. And that's it. That's the final screen. So this is kind of a summary of everything. You can see I'm not going to go through these all singularly, except there's my benefit cost ratio, 1.87. Not bad. That's a very reasonable, justifiable number. And it's a conservative number. I think that's what's important. I didn't have to, notice I didn't have to pad anything. I didn't have to throw in a bunch of expensive equipment or infrastructure that we're going to protect. I just stuck with the most basic, homes that we're actually targeting, directly targeting for defensible space and ignition resistant work. I mean, so that's why it's a comfortable, confident number, because I didn't have to pad it with anything. And the way that we're running our HMGP Post Fire round, we're not going to be, it's not competitive to the extent of who's going to get the highest BC ratio. You don't get any extra brownie points for getting a 2.01 over a 1.87. That's just not how we're going to compete here. This is a pass-fail number. And again, part of that reason is because the BCA tool is a very narrow kind of perspective on cost effectiveness. It's a requirement, it's a FEMA requirement, and we're definitely going to do it. We're going to do it right. But for our competitive purposes, it's, for me, a pass-fail tool, strictly for application purposes. Once you pass 1.0 or above credibly with good numbers, we're going to move on. We're not going to come back and override you or move your money to somebody else because they got a 2.01 or greater. Okay, so you've got a 1.87. There's, at least for this round, there is no reason to go back and revisit these infrastructure or timber or fire suppression cost values and try to keep running that number up, because you're not going to get any credit for it. Just pass the 1.0 credibly. Do it in a way that's credible, and then you're good to go. So that was the final screen. What next? Click Save and Continue. Now we're back to the Mountain View subdivision main screen. I could add more mitigation actions using these toggles here, but since wildfire is the only type of hazard we're mitigating, we're going to stop there. Now I go back, save and go back. Now we're just going up levels. Now I'm in my project page. It shows both of my subdivisions with their respective benefit cost ratios, BCRs. Remember, the first one was 1.04. Mountain View was 1.87, a little more cost effective. The key is the combination of the two is reflected right here. That's my overall project BCR of 1.39. That's the number I'm going to add in my full application package or the full application document under that BCA part where it asks what's the project BCA. That's it right there, 1.39. So again, that's just an average of these two. I could add as many neighborhoods or subdivisions or individual structures as I wanted, right? I could put as many in and it's going to average out to my overall project BCR. But here's something I wanted to point out. For these wildfire proposals where you have multiple neighborhoods that are separated geographically, in other words, they're not contiguous, each neighborhood is going to have to stand on its own as its own benefit cost ratio. Each one. So you can't have, if the Mountain View subdivision came in at a 0.80 or a 0.95, and the Dry Pine subdivision was a little higher, and the average came in at above 1.0, came in above 1, it's still, the Mountain View subdivision would still not be eligible for the grant funding. So in other words, each subdivision has got to stand on its own here, even though, yes, they're averaging the entire thing for your project BCA. So, okay, let's say that I'm done and I've got all of my neighborhoods or subdivisions that I want to put in one project. I've got them all in and I'm ready to go. What's the next step? It's the final step, and it's to generate the two attachments that you'll need for your full application. One of them is a very quick summary report that the tool generates, and the other one is a zip file that includes all of this work that reviewers can open up in their own BCA tool on their own computer. So let's see how to do that. First, let's print the summary report. I can use these two buttons right here to get my two attachments. That's the report, and that'll be the zip file. So there's print the report. Just so you know, I could also print it from right down here, print report. Let's go ahead and use the button, select the project, because you can have multiple projects in a single BCA tool. In your case, you're probably likely just to have the one project unless you're doing multiple proposals. Select the project to print. Okay, so there it is. Again, this is a summary level view of the work you did for both of the neighborhoods or both of the subdivisions. It's project level. So I'll hit print, save it as a PDF, and I guess it doesn't much matter where I save it for these purposes, but I've got to leave that, see that where it says report, BCA report, I definitely want to keep that in the title. That's going to distinguish it from all the other stuff. But I am going to add my sub-applicant name in there for an identifying purposes when I attach it to the application. So we'll save that. Okay. One down, one to go. The next one, BCA, export. So we're exporting a BCA for this project, and we're going to export it as a, see there, save as type, a zip file. So give it a name. Again, use the applicant agent's name in it somewhere, and we'll just call it a BCA. Just call it the BCA. It's the full zip file. So, and you do not want to open the zip file once you create this. Just attach the entire zip file to your application package that you send to EMD. Export successful. Don't try to open it up and submit each of the little files and subfolders individually to your application package. The entire zip file gets attached to it. So that's pretty straightforward. Two required attachments are generated from this tool alone, the summary report and the zip file. So what's next? I think you're done. You have your full, there's your full project with its BCR of 1.39, the full costs $265,836, full benefits of $369,947. I will point out here that that number is always going to be, well, maybe not always, that number is going to be different most of the time than the quote, the project estimate, the budget that you put in your application, right? Remember why that is. So for example, in my budget summary sheet, the total cost I'm saying is 255,300. That is consistent with everything I'm putting in the budget section of my full application document. But the BCA says it's going to cost me 265,836. That's because of those maintenance costs. Remember the annual maintenance costs of maintaining defensible space conditions? I put in $1,000 per year and my project useful life was 10 years. So it's factoring that in, and that's okay. The only time, as a reviewer, the only time I would ever see a red flag about this number being different is if it was actually lower than the budget summary, than what's on the application. Because that would suggest that I have not, in my BCA, captured all of the project costs. So as long as your number on this line is higher than the budget you're proposing, then you're probably fine, because again, it's including the overall maintenance costs over a period of time, well beyond an application budget. Okay, so that's it. I can go back home, I can exit out. I hope this was helpful. I'm sure you have some questions after watching this, but hopefully you've been able to use the pause and rewind buttons to go over things again. And if you have any questions, of course, you feel free to get in touch. You know how to reach me by now. Also, feel free to reach out to Debbie Metter, our Hazard Mitigation Program coordinator. Neither of us are BCA experts, but hopefully we can point you in the right direction. One last thing, BCA helpline. FEMA has a helpline specifically for BCA, and the folks on the other end of that line are BCA experts. They really can help you with technical difficulties. I don't have the number on hand, but it is available at the same website that you downloaded the BCA tool from on the FEMA website. Search for FEMA BCA. It shows up right at the top of Google. You click in there. You'll find the helpline number. It's like an 800 number. So if I can't answer your question, I'm probably just going to refer you to the 800 number. That's it. Thanks, everyone, and good luck.